Welcome to the porch, y'all. We're so glad you're here. I'm Lindsay Baccardo, keynote speaker and virtual presenter for organizations who want to build strong, heart-centered, multi-generational teams. I personally believe that the modern day leader has a moral obligation to grow personally and lead others from a grounded and healthy and healed place. So you're going to hear me bring on psychologists, neuroscience experts, emotional intelligence researchers, really anyone that helps a leader grow personally and ultimately impact the culture of their organization. This is where I bring my favorite thought leaders on to share these topics with you. I'm so glad you're here. And today we have my girl, Lindsay Mitrosilis. Woo! Now, as I'll share a little bit about, but we'll talk about her a ton here. As a former executive in staffing, Lindsay now owns and operates her own LinkedIn agency, helping executives like you, influencers, and companies build brands on LinkedIn. And Lindsay and I have been on this journey together for probably well over a year now. And she's helped me grow my LinkedIn followership to almost 10,000. I'm sure we'll cross 10,000 before this year ends. And that's just not to have a bunch of people around. It's to have the right people that I can connect with and deliver value to. And that's what we're talking about today. We're not talking about being the next Justin Bieber of LinkedIn. We're talking about how do we help you make the most of your network and bring value to other people. And I know that's in Lindsay's DNA. And I'm so glad to have you here. Linz, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. What a great intro. Yes. Thank you.
The longest intro ever. Fantastic. Yes. Okay. I want to ask before we jump in, Linz, what made you say, you know what, I'm going to double down on LinkedIn and help people discover themselves, their voice, and use LinkedIn as a tool? What made you take that route?
Great question. This whole journey started, it basically pivoted from when I was in my corporate job, selfishly keeping all my LinkedIn secrets, to come 2020, March 2020, I was in a mastermind call with a group of female entrepreneurs. And they said, hey, Lindsay, can you teach us how to use LinkedIn for like leads and sales? And I'm like, heck yeah, that's how I built my whole business in the last 10 years, my book of business and my corporate job. And that just like sparked this whole thing. I went on this path of teaching entrepreneurs to start how to leverage LinkedIn for leads and sales. And this has been the last 2.5 years and we never looked back. It's crazy.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. What have you seen change with LinkedIn over the last few years? Because I know I send you like every day, I send you Gary V posts about, you know, how powerful LinkedIn as a platform. What have you seen change in the last 2 years? Like, why should we be paying attention?
Yeah, I'm basically going to regurgitate what you've all heard Gary Vee say anyways, but we'll say it again. The organic reach is so good. It's like 30% more than any other platform out there right now. Instagram, Facebook, you name it, you know, even if you're on TikTok, although I think people have a lot of, you know, TikTok is fun. But there still is that like, or that get organic reach opportunity on LinkedIn I'm not seeing anywhere else. The other thing that's really cool is like how we're talking about LinkedIn evolving. It is no longer a virtual resume platform only. This is a place where people are selling as entrepreneurs. They're building brands to attract more candidates to their pipeline. They're retaining team members because now they're showing up as this thought leader and their team members are proud of like the people that they're, or the boss that they have, or the person that they're working for, because this person is coming out, building that personal brand, and they're really talking about things that matter to their employees and their team. And it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And I think there's no other platform like this right now that's giving leaders, especially in corporate, an opportunity to do this in a way that feels probably the most like intentional and the most, what's the word I'm looking for? It's overused to me, but it is true.
Authentic.
Authentic. That's it.
That's the word.
Yeah.
It's very much, yeah. You know, it's so interesting that you say that because I really want to dispel this myth that you are supposed to be something that you're not on LinkedIn. We're really saying like LinkedIn is a place to bring your best thoughts, your best intentions, to bring fresh ideas, to bring encouragement, to connect with people. It's not necessarily like build a brand that is, you know, completely different than who you are and let's create an archetype even though it's not you. It's really like true thought leaders that I know, they spend that time working out their true beliefs and their ideas. What do you think when people, because I know y'all, it's like I don't want to be a social media star. That's not what I'm aiming for. So why would I spend all this time? Oh, nice mug, by the way. Fantastic. Look at that
I love
mug.
mug. My favorite mug.
um, what would you say to somebody who feels maybe just honestly in their heart, in their mind, a little resistance around like having this virtual version of themselves?
Yeah, I would say, listen, I totally get it. And there's a lot of reasons that people really struggle with jumping on any social platform. LinkedIn is a
Mm-hmm.
social media platform.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say there's a few things that come to mind that I've heard consistently when we really get to the root of it. It's that they don't feel like what they have to say is actually important, or they feel like other people aren't going to find it as important as they do,
Mm-hmm.
or they're worried about what other people think.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say right now, and I'm not a mindset coach, so it's not my world, but what I would tell people is like, hey, if you really feel like you've got a message that promotes positivity, it's going to impact people for the good, you have to go for it. You
Yes.
have to go for it. And to worry about what other people think, that's just a thing that's happened, it's been addressed for so many times. But I always say, what opinions and thoughts of other people do not pay your bills. They don't create impact in the world. They don't create good in the world. Like, it doesn't matter. We've got to tune those things out. Show up, put out the content, state the words that you have in your heart, and like you're going to attract the right people to you. This is what little mini communities are all about. And
That's right.
people need to hear your message. So again, I'm not a mindset person, but I would just encourage you, like, if you've got that thing, that voice inside that's saying, I got to get this message out, do it. You are going to
Yes.
help somebody. You're going to help somebody.
That's a really good point because, something that we've talked about and I've learned over the years too is like when you say something with conviction, even one time, y'all, I posted that I was drinking a gallon of water a day because I wanted to be hydrated. Like, what could be wrong with that? Oh, you better believe people didn't like that I was doing this. I'm going to poison myself. Something. I was like, guys, everybody relax. But anytime you post anything with conviction, there is a chance that your second, your third ring of people, once that post gets out of your first round of connections, there's a chance that people are going to be rude or just harsh. I've had that happen. We've seen that happen when
Yeah.
we post things. And what would you say? I'm just trying to dispel some of the things that we
Yeah.
can get, some of our natural blocks around building a LinkedIn following.
Mm,
Even if it's for recruiting and retention, which we're going to talk about in a moment,
yeah.
there's still this like, oh, what do we say? We're a regulated field. What if I say something that's offensive? What if people are mean? What do you say about that when you start to run into connections that maybe are rude or divisive? You've probably seen it on celebrity, on bigger platforms too.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things I tell people, like, listen, there's nothing wrong with blocking and deleting,
Heck
honestly.
yeah.
If you've got a hater, if you've got a troll, there's nothing wrong with blocking and deleting these people at all. And it doesn't matter what social platform, but especially LinkedIn. I tell people block and delete if you need to,
Yes.
because that negativity isn't necessary. No one wants it. No one needs it. And it's just go ahead and block and delete,
Brilliant. It's so
and
simple, but you don't have to be a victim to that.
no, not at all. And at the same time, I will also say, like, there are people who aren't trolls who have a differing opinion, and you've got to be good enough and convicted, to your point, enough that with your message, like, it's okay to welcome in other opinions or to have the conversation. That's actually the beautiful thing about LinkedIn, especially right now, is that people
Yes,
are having conversations. They're
that's right.
having real dialogue. And I will also preface this with one of the things I really love about LinkedIn is they're actually taking off, I say this lightly, the political agenda stuff that you find on Facebook that gets really fiery. LinkedIn is actually doing a good job at just kind of like minimizing that because they just don't want to be known to be the platform for that. There's other platforms for that, for sure.
Yes.
But LinkedIn is not that place. So,
Yep.
I just think it's a great place to have great conversation. If you've got haters, block and delete. And if you are welcome, and open to an opposing side, then like have the conversation. It's great.
I love that. But it does take this level of personal growth and self-awareness to be comfortable with that and to say that's okay. You don't have to agree. I've said stuff about generations that people don't agree with, and it's like, okay, I don't have, the goal was not for everybody to approve of everything I say. The goal was to create conversation.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm curious. Oh, what were you going to say, Linz?
I was just going to say, it's kind of like when you look at, big names, big leaders, anybody that has gone out and just like kind of put their like drawn their line in the sand, you're naturally going to get people that just don't agree with that. And that's okay. But the other side of that is you're going to have a ton of people super bought into what you say. They want to follow your leadership, your message. They're going to rally around you. They are your people. They are your community. And those are the people that you just need to focus on. And
Brilliant.
I would apply this to, recruiting and retention. Let's talk about that. But like, there's a way to do that too. So
Well, it's so important. We said we were going to talk about like this kind of the attitude and the approach that you need to have when you come to LinkedIn. And so I'm glad we set the groundwork for that. So we can kind of, when we're talking about this is what we mean. We're saying come with an open mind, delete blockers, delete trolls, delete block people that you don't want in your world. You can always take them off. You have control. You're not completely vulnerable out there in the world.
yeah.
And now there's this element that's come up a ton in the last 18 months about using LinkedIn for recruiting purposes. And that's been going on for a long time. I know you can buy certain packages where you have more access to future employees, to, lists of people. But let's talk for a minute about these two buckets,
Yeah.
retention and recruiting, because fascinating when you and I were chatting about how LinkedIn works so well as a tool for both of those. So tell us a little bit why LinkedIn works so well. Just let's start with recruiting. For recruiting itself, what would you say?
Well, I would say, I think LinkedIn, the statistic is that like 90% of people come to LinkedIn to either find a job or to find candidates.
Mm-hmm.
75% of LinkedIn users are passive candidates, meaning they might not actively be looking for a job, but if the right opportunity fell into their lap or a recruiter from your company came to this potential candidate, they'd consider the job. There's a lot of that going on LinkedIn. So it's still the number one platform to be if you're going to recruit candidates, if you want to build a pipeline of, solid candidates. It's still the online resume, though I think that's evolving, but it's got the online resume. I don't even think people look at resumes anymore. I think they go and look at LinkedIn's.
It's so interesting. Well, you get an idea of their career history,
Yeah.
and you can also see how they interact with people.
Yes. Yes. It's one of the most, I think one of the best recruiting tools, because to your point, like, yes, you can see all of the things about someone's background, but you can see how they interact. Like you can't hide that. If someone's posting on other people's content, you see all that.
That's right. That's so true. Well, and there's a place to do recommendations. So you can see how did other people experience them.
Which
Obviously,
I
most
mean, you
people don't
control
ask for
that.
bad recommendations. But what were you going to say?
You control like what recommendations are seen, but
Yes, you
yeah.
kind of control some of that. But how about for retention? Because you and I were talking, this is fascinating to me because we tend to think, okay, LinkedIn, recruiters, post your jobs, blah, blah, blah. But there's also, what about the side of retention? How does LinkedIn help with that? What would you say?
Yeah, well, when we were talking earlier about kind of, I hate the term personal brand. I actually like to use the term personal presence. When you are working on your personal presence on a platform like LinkedIn, you're talking about thought leadership. You're being a thought leader. You are talking about things that matter. You're really building out like this, this is who I am in a professional network setting on a social media platform for everyone to see. And everyone to see not only includes, potential employers or your boss, but it includes your team. And so in a very remote world right now, that
Mhm.
connection is totally lost versus years ago when we were all in the office all the time. So your team, while you might not be talking with them every day, or you might not be on calls with them every day, they're still seeing you show up in their LinkedIn feed talking about things that matter, that aren't even work related, that aren't like, hey, Sally, did you get me this report? Like, no, it's about things that matter to you, the reasons why your team loves you so much. And it's just
Yep.
constantly, they're being reminded of that in the feed. And so people we know want to work for people that they like, that they care about, that they
Yes.
know, that they trust. When people leave a job, they're not leaving the job, they're leaving their boss. So when you become that person in their feed that just they feel motivated by, they're inspired by, they're excited about, they can rally behind you, All those things help with retention.
That's brilliant. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it with a couple different companies that I've worked with or that I love just watching from the outside. Element 3, they're a marketing company here in Indianapolis. They're fantastic. And they'll put their podcast links in
Mhm.
posts on LinkedIn, and then they'll shout out their teammates who made the podcast. And you can just tell there's like real, genuine human connection there and appreciation. And there's something about that leaving the four walls of the company and everybody hearing, oh, they really do like each other. They're really doing some cool stuff over there.
It's so yes, not only to like retain your current team, but just like the teams around you, right?
That's
Because
right.
people want to work at a place that they're proud of, that they feel like they're part of a bigger mission, that they align with the values. Well,
Yep.
how many times do we hear that and then we don't see them play out through their leadership or through their manager or their boss?
Yep.
But then the people that do show up on LinkedIn and they live out those values, and it could just be like first kind of tier hiring manager. It doesn't have to be at the C-suite level.
Yes.
This is what creates that community, that buy-in, the retention, that people just are like, oh my gosh, have you heard of this person? We love working for them. All those things matter. And I think they're going
Yes.
to matter even more moving into the coming years.
That is so true. I'm curious if you have a question for Lindsay about using LinkedIn and these kind of HR functions and leadership and thought leader functions, would you put it in the chat? Because we have an expert here and she's fantastic. And I'm sure, and I have a million questions I could ask, but I'm going to give everybody a chance to ask. And while we're waiting for those to come in, I am so curious because we're kind of talking around this idea that when you use LinkedIn, it actually like helps you walk the talk as a leader. It helps you be genuine and through. It's
Yeah.
not a place where you're like, we are awesome. Look at all we do. Humble brag, humble brag, humble. It's really a chance for you. Not that you can't humble brag. Please tell us about your team. Tell us what you love about your team.
Yeah.
And there's this idea that gives you a chance to walk the talk in a new way. Can
Mhm.
you talk about, I know you've kind of already mentioned that, but can you talk about it a little bit more?
Well, I think when I look back to my days in corporate, which was at staffing companies, I remember there was a big push for like Glassdoor reviews.
Yes.
And now, like, this is the new Glassdoor review, like where you can, to your point, you walk the walk or walk the talk. Like, it's going to come out. Like, if you're a crappy company or you have horrible leadership, it's going to come out through your employees. Like, you can't hide behind anything anymore. Like, it's just all out there now.
Yes.
So, and we know that everyone on this call and everyone watching is not like that, but let's amplify the good things about your company, how awesome your leaders are. Like, this is the way to do it, right?
Yes.
I think most people, and even considering job opportunity, people in the interview process now are not like, let me adjust my seat. People in the interview process now are not just like, oh, I guess I'll go look at Glassdoor and like, let's see, they're doing that, but they're also like going to LinkedIn and seeing, okay, so if I'm going to be working for Josh, like, what is Josh all about on LinkedIn?
That's
Oh,
right.
these are cool things. Oh, Josh is active, or oh, Josh is like non-existent on LinkedIn. That kind of feels weird. Like, there's this social proof through social media that we're always looking for, whether you're buying from a store, making reservation at a restaurant, or choosing to come work for a company. Like, we're
Yes.
looking for all of that on social platforms.
Yes.
And there's a question. Oh, what is that?
Yes.
We can do as well. Allie, let me tell you, Heidi from JobBot. Heidi is the CEO of JobBot. They just surpassed 1 million followers on their company LinkedIn page.
Is
Uh,
it job bot like robot?
yes,
Okay.
JOBOT, JobBot. Fascinating. And here's the thing that I love, let's talk about this too, is and maybe you're going to get to this at some point, but leaders who actually don't want their teams or don't want their companies to be active on LinkedIn. Yes, thank you, Sam. That's Heidi. There's leaders that don't want their teams and their managers to be active on LinkedIn because they're afraid that some company is going to come in and swoop them away. And then there's people like Heidi who are like, no, actually, we want all of our team to be posting consistently every single week at a minimum on LinkedIn because we know
Yes.
this helps our brand. And let
Yes.
me tell you, I've thought many times, like, what if I just ditched this whole entrepreneur thing and went and worked at JobBot? Because holy crap, this place looks like so much fun, what they're all about. Like, they are out there with this stuff and it helps them. It doesn't
Yeah.
hurt them, it helps them.
Yeah. So in case y'all, we pivoted here because we're have our friends asking who would you follow on LinkedIn to start to see who's doing this well. And so that's why we were talking about JobBot, and Heidi
Mhm.
is the CEO of JobBot, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This was great. So Karen is here from Element 3, Karen Cicada, and she said, Element 3 is a local marketing company. She said, we drop hints and info on LinkedIn for prospective candidates that basically tells them exactly how we interview on purpose, just to give them a leg up if they're researching us. Isn't that brilliant to put like Easter eggs on LinkedIn?
Oh, Karen, can I use this story? Like, this is so good. I'm going to use this on
Yes.
like LinkedIn. I want to talk about this because I think this is kind of this new like case to crack. I think there's a lot of, traditionally, even like a year ago, I would say LinkedIn company pages specifically were just like not really a focus. Now people are like, yes, this matters, right? It's like
Yes.
Instagram. You have your own Instagram page, and then you've got like an Instagram for the company.
That's right.
This is evolving and moving over to the LinkedIn side too, and that people want to know like, well, what's the difference? And then how do I build out both? And why do they matter? And Karen, to your point, like this is exactly one of the reasons why.
Yes.
And just another hot tip. Sure thing. We have one coming out, I think, tomorrow. Oh, I
So
love
yes, so Karen said in the chat, she's like, yes, our company's putting one out tomorrow, another hint tomorrow on the behavioral interview tactics, which is fantastic. It's like, we're showing you our cards. If you want to prepare, it's an open book test. Go to LinkedIn and see what we're doing, because that's an interesting like litmus test too, to see if somebody's doing their research.
right. And honestly, I think, because as a candidate, people are always like, okay, how do I prepare for the interview? How do I prepare? And they go research the company. Do they go to LinkedIn? What are they looking on LinkedIn? Are they looking
Yes.
at leaders? Are they like really, are they taking all of that into consideration? Like really looking at the company holistically, AKA
Yeah.
looking at leadership, managers, team members, and looking at their LinkedIns. And on the flip side, team talking here, like, how are you encouraging your people to be active on LinkedIn? Because
Yeah.
it's a two-way street and it matters. You know,
Yes.
it really matters. The other thing I was going to say too is as we are kind of coming into this, we're in a time of, economic uncertainty. We're seeing a lot of layoffs happen, a lot of downsizing. There's just a lot of uncertainty right now. In my experience, over the last 10, 12 years being part of staffing, I'm seeing both sides of the pendulum really. This is about to be a hiring manager's market. Staffing companies thrive right now because
Mhm.
there's more employees, there's more candidates available for job orders,
Yes.
job recs. And so it's time really now we're kind of flipping back this other way of hiring managers really need to be more selective in who they're talking to. It's not so much about like, oh, we can't find enough candidates to fill our jobs. Like it's going to swing the other way.
Yep.
And so again, LinkedIn needs to be part of that bigger strategy for you too.
That's so smart. That's so smart. What if somebody, Linz, what if somebody's coming today and maybe they're new to HR, or they've been in HR for a long time, but they're new to LinkedIn? What if somebody only has like 10 minutes a day? They're not going to turn into like get their PhD on LinkedIn. What would you tell them? What advice would you give them, and how could they jumpstart their presence on LinkedIn?
Sure. Well, I would always start with like, what's the goal? So you might have to answer that back for me. But in general, I say like, what's the goal? Are you trying to build a pipeline of candidates? Are you trying to build a pipeline of just like a stronger community or audience for yourself? If you're talking
Let's
about,
say it's the candidates one. Let's say you're
um,
like, oh man, we've got some roles we need to fill. They're hard to fill. We're trying to use some new tactics to get in front of the right people.
there's a couple things I would do. I would one, make sure that at least the company page is pumping out content. So whether your marketing person is taking that on or whatever, but and then you can reshare your company page's content if you don't have time to make your own content. But the most important thing you can do is really make connections. You can strategically reach out to people that either could be ideal candidates for your pipeline or candidates for other job orders you're going to have coming, open in the coming quarters.
Yeah.
Um, you just have to go back to thinking about LinkedIn being a networking platform. And what do
Hmm.
we know to be true about networking is that it is super valuable to build out a network that you can lean on when you potentially have a need. And that could be like, hey, you know, Sally, I saw that you guys are going through a layoff right now. Like, is there anyone you'd love to help out from your team that you're like, hey, sorry, this person's caught up in a layoff, but you know, you could refer them over to our job order or our rec. There's a lot of that goes on, you know.
Yes.
There's all kinds of stuff with building a network that you can just cross referral or whatever.
That's, I try to like translate this generationally, because this idea of having a virtual presence where work actually gets done is kind of wild. So I think
Yeah.
of it like if LinkedIn was a building that you went to specifically when you were looking for a job or looking for candidates or looking to have meaningful professional development conversations.
Mhm.
Think about like what would you do while you are in that physical building?
Yeah.
You would have meaningful conversations. You wouldn't be like, everybody pay attention, and just throw cards, business cards at everybody. You would build relationships when you're in that building. And so I think of it sometimes like that, like, okay, I'm going to go to the LinkedIn building, and what behaviors do I do? Just like when I go to the grocery store, what am I doing here? When I go to the LinkedIn building in my mind, what am I doing?
What floor are you going to go on? Are you
What
going to
floor?
go?
Do
What
you
floor are
use
you
the
going
elevator?
on? And like, what are you going to do when you get there?
Yeah.
So true. So I would say if you have 10 minutes a day, strategically connect, like search for people to connect with
And
for
how
five.
do you know who you're supposed to connect with? How would you search?
So I would like, let's say you've got I come from like tech staffing, and Java developer was like the role I feel like we were always trying to find. So let's say
Yeah.
you were looking for Java developers. You
Okay.
would go into the top search on the left hand corner and
Yep.
just in Java developer, click enter, and you'll see a couple different things pop up. It'll be like Java developer in groups, Java developer in job titles or job openings, Java developer in people. In people is where you want to go.
Okay.
That will give you a list of all the people that have the role Java developer. Then in the filter section, you can filter out by location, by current company, by current title. So play around with that, and then you can find and condense your people there. And
Yes.
the other 5 minutes I would actually just spend engaging with people and engaging with people who are active on LinkedIn. So people who aren't resharing content that isn't their own, but people who are making content and sharing it. People that you see have very active communities on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And this doesn't have to do anything with like your job or what your goals with LinkedIn are. Just getting plugged into active communities on LinkedIn is going to, like, it will pay itself in dividends for you. I
Yes.
promise you that, because it's
Yes.
those connections that make other significant connections for you that will in turn help you back with your number one goal on LinkedIn. But I'm telling you, build the relationships, spend the time, engage with people's content, reach out, say hello, do a coffee meeting, whatever you need to do to build significant relationships, and be intentional on the platform.
That's so important.
That's,
And that's, I mean, the irony is, Linz, I just realized because you mentioned this kind of second degree connection concept.
oh,
Like the people that you know, even on LinkedIn, they may not be able to solve all your problems, but I bet they know somebody that can solve your problem. So you don't need to necessarily know everybody, but how I met you, Linz, was through our friend Megan. Megan was on a Zoom like this, okay? And I was scrolling through the gallery and I was like, who is that? She's got great energy. And I looked up her name because she put it on the Zoom little box in the corner. And I found her. Where did I look for her? LinkedIn. And then I messaged her. And then I started writing on her posts, not liking them, but saying, like, that's a really interesting thought. I've always thought this. What do you think? And I started to have meaningful conversations with Megan and building a relationship with her. When she found out what I was trying to do professionally, who did she say I needed to meet? You, right here.
so
And
cool.
that's why we're connected. And so it's like part of it is understanding the power of connection. We talk about in our career development class, Lauren and I, we talk about, if you know 1,000 people through your social networks, all of them, if you were to add them up, 1,000 is reasonable. Most people have at least 600. That's like the bottom end total, but maybe 1,000 total between all of the different networks and all the people you just naturally know in real life.
Mhm.
So think about if I know 1,000 people and Lindsay knows 1,000 people, 1,000 times 1,000 is 1,000,000 connections. So if I came to Lindsay and I said, I really want to work for Disneyland in Anaheim, who do you know that can help me? I totally just made this up. Do you know somebody, Linz, that I could talk to that might
No,
know someone?
I know about 5. Yes.
Okay, that's crazy. I'm coming to Anaheim. Oh, but you can see this is the power of networking.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so we have another question. On LinkedIn, you can open yourself up to recruiters, but it seems like a green light for franchise peddlers to spam you with opportunities. Is this a grin and bear it, or can you add language to your profile to dissuade those kind of fake connections? What do you think?
Great question, Una. So what I would say is you can be very selective in who you accept into your connections. When someone sends you a connection request, here is your permission. You don't have to accept them. You can click ignore. So that's one way that people will come into your world, right? Is like through a connection and they're like, hey, I want to connect with you. Just be selective in who you connect back with. That's one thing. Let's say they're already a connection and they're spamming you. You can block them. You can delete them. You can mute them too. There's an option to mute in your messages, but there's nothing more that we can do except for like use some of these tools to kind of hide or mitigate or minimize those things. They are annoying. I get it. And, but they're everywhere. They're everywhere on other social platforms too.
And I think that's the piece that we forget about, y'all, is that every single form of communication goes through a spam phase. It's basically like you can't get away from it. So think about, remember when mail used to just be quality mail and now you get a bunch of random stuff that you don't want in your mailbox and then it feels like most of your mail is junk mail? And then that happened with real email. And then that happened with robocalls. So we all get these robocalls with fake voicemails now. So this happens with any meaningful platform.
Yeah, so true.
So, Linz, one other question from Una, and then I've got some more HR recruiting questions. Is LinkedIn Premium worth it? I think you're going to say depends on why.
Well, it depends if you are actively reaching out to people. And if you really want to use the platform, like if you're going to go all in on LinkedIn, Premium is worth it. Especially if you're going to be actively searching, maximizing out your connections every single month. You want to see who's looking at your profile and stuff like that. Do I recommend it to get started? No. Just get active, get on there. And when you feel the time is right, when you're starting to kind of run into some boundaries that LinkedIn puts in on a free account, then consider Premium. But I'd say it's worth it for what I'm doing, for what Lindsay's doing, if you're being active and growing your connections and all those things. But if you're just kind of getting started and dabbling, the free account is totally fine to get started.
That's great. Great advice. Now, if I want to go back to the HR world for a minute, because I was in a training a couple weeks ago. We're talking about generations at work. And somebody came up to me and said, will you please convince my HR team and show me how to use LinkedIn for recruiting? Because I know we're missing an opportunity. What would you say to an HR team that's, kind of wanting to stay in the traditional route of finding, for recruiting's sake, of finding employees? What would you say to them? And I know you've already given us a bunch of stats. What would you say to a team to get them to pivot and start using LinkedIn?
Gosh,
It's part of a strategy.
that's many things, but I would be curious how they get their candidates in the first place. Because if you're not on social, if you're just posting a job on your website, hoping to get people to come in, we have to think about your job order as like something that you're selling. Okay. This is something you're selling. And if you're not getting it out there on Indeed, on LinkedIn, on ZipRecruiter, like if you're not using any of these platforms, yes, like who's going to know about your job order? Who's going to know about the open recs that you have? The quality candidates that are out there are looking on these other platforms. And so the people that are leveraging these platforms, they're winning, they're selling more, they're getting more candidates in their pipeline. So that's what I mean, it's kind of hard for me to go into some type of like recruiting strategy if I don't know all the details, but that's initially what I would say is like, listen, you have to think about your job rec as something that you're selling and you have to get it out there. If you're not, then you're just hoping that word of mouth through your team members, sending it to their friends is going to work. Like, I don't know.
It's not gonna work. Well, and this goes back to that mentality. I talk about this all the time when we're talking about generations at work. It's that we're in a season too where employees have a ton of power. The knowledge of the company doesn't stay at the top. When we look at orgs, the organizational charts of how companies are organized. Knowledge is now available to everyone, so power isn't concentrated up at the top. You can find out a lot about any company if you like follow their Twitter. You'll learn a lot about any company. But the other piece is that most people have multiple streams of income. Half of millennials already have multiple streams of income. And so this idea, like, they should be so lucky to work for us. When we have an opening, there's no good work anymore. Nobody wants to come work for us. And I would challenge that and say, no, it's just that future employees have the upper hand because they have more power and control over their income now. So you have to have such a compelling case for people to want to work with you, and you have to be able to communicate that compelling case so well that people will say, I will forego my freedom, I will forego these choices because I'd rather belong to what you're doing.
Yep. And just something to say in tandem with that, I feel
Yes.
like there was a lot of people that left corporate, not to retire, but in 2020, a lot of people wanted to go out on their own, become consultants and contractors. They wanted to get away from the traditional 9 to 5. And I think you're going to see, again, a swing back the other direction where now you've got this group of candidates who have experienced this freedom, but they kind of miss, being an entrepreneur is very lonely. So they kind of miss
Yes.
having a team environment. They miss being able to just turn it off at night. They
Yep.
kind of miss that. And so you're going to have an influx of candidates coming back to the marketplace. But they've tasted that sense of freedom. So they're going to be very choosy and like, yes, like I want to be part of a team. I want to know like what's going on. How are you guys building relationships? What are you doing outside of just the company? How are you giving back to the world? And if none of these things are communicated on social platforms, because that's where your team or potential team is hanging out, then like you lose. You
That's
totally
right.
lose. And the companies that are doing that, they're doing it well, and they're getting the better candidates that are out there.
Brilliant.
I don't know what to say.
I know, it's kind of interesting. It's almost like, prove to me that I should wear socks in the winter. And you're like,
Okay.
this
If
is like
that's
not
what we
even
want, if that's the conversation we want to have.
do you want frostbite? I guess it's pretty simple, but it's really like we're at a tipping point. It sounds like where to not do this is to your detriment. It's not something cool and flashy and shiny to do. It's if you do not have a social media presence for your company, organization, and even your personal brand, you are behind.
Yes. So let me ask you this, because
Please.
what I've seen in my work that I'm doing, because you and I run parallel in a lot that we do, I've seen the companies that struggle with this tend to have there's a generational gap with the leadership and the people who are like, tell our HR team or tell our CEO to do this. It's like, well, the CEO or the HR team,
Yeah.
the generation that feels like, well, what are we going to really put out there? Like vulnerable on social media? And I get
Yes.
it.
Yes.
But like, what do we do? How do we kind of help teams and support and all that kind of stuff? What would you say?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is human nature to be afraid of the next round of technology. That's human nature. So, like when the radio came out, the American Psychiatric Association uh, published a statement saying this, piece of hardware in your house will bring messages in that you can't control. Beware, parents, beware, beware. And every stage when we up level our technology and communication speeds up, humans kind of wince like, oh, this could go really bad. And so part of it is, whatever technology you grew up with, you're most comfortable with is going to be where you kind of want to snuggle in and cozy in. It's hard for me as a millennial to want to understand the metaverse. Like sometimes I want to understand it. Sometimes I'm like, ugh. And I don't want to be a hologram. I don't want to live in VR. I want to be me in this world. And it's almost like every generation has that. Millennials joke now because we're like, we don't want to be on TikTok, but then we find ourselves on TikTok, and Gen Zs make fun of us for how we shoot videos on TikTok. So it's really about how we interact with technology and know in your guts, like it's human to resist the next level of technology that's coming our way. And we are also born in a tech evolution. So it's coming at us like a fire hose spray. We're getting blasted with new ways to communicate and connect with other people. And so I kind of go way back and say, okay, first of all, this is normal. It's not a boomer issue. It's not a Gen X issue. It's not a millennial issue. It's whoever is like gone past those first few stages of their life and are cozy with their tech, which makes perfect sense.
Right.
And so we try to start there. And then we ask, we talk about, and you and I have talked about this, when you go to a restaurant, you mentioned this. If I said, Linz, let's go to my favorite pizza place, Napoli's, here in Indianapolis, I know that you would look up on your phone the menu, the vibe, like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to know, like, what do I wear? What do people like there?
Yeah.
And you would preview this actual real place, this real restaurant, you would preview it digitally.
Mhm.
And if you looked up the menu and the food sounded gross or was too expensive or wasn't your vibe, you might say, I really don't want to eat here. I don't need to go and discover it. I've already discovered it. I'm not interested. And so it's like, we're already doing this. So I also try to help everybody understand, like, we all do this already, y'all. We all look at reviews when you go to a new city. Should we go to the aquarium? Ooh, it got a 2 stars. It's probably smelly. I don't want to go there. Let's go somewhere else. We all do this already.
Mhm.
So copy and pasting that into how do we represent our company brand online for future employees and for current employees to see that we really do exist is
Yep.
important. That
Yep.
was such a long answer, but I'm passionate about it. And you get
No,
it. You and
I
I live in this world.
yes.
Okay, we
Yeah.
have a couple of questions. Can I ask you some more?
Yes. Right.
Oh, this was a good comment.
Okay.
Miria said, the post and pray days are over. You have to be out actively searching for candidates and creating a company brand for yourself. Brilliant. Absolutely. We obviously agree with that wholeheartedly. And then somebody asked, is it appropriate to post about your side business on LinkedIn? What about the optics for your current employer? What do you think about that, Linz? Woo!
That's
Good
a
one.
question. Ooh, spicy. Okay. I would say it is completely up to you, the relationship you have with your company, with your boss. I know somebody who is very out loud about the side hustle he has, and he's still getting job opportunities. Okay. And then I know when I was in corporate, heck no, would I be posting about my side hustle because I didn't want them to think that I was going to leave or I didn't want to get fired. But
Yes.
there is a way to leverage LinkedIn still for your side hustle, which is because that's what I did. It was just being in the background. So I would still make connections. I would have one-on-one conversations in the DMs, or I would say, hey, let's jump on a quick Zoom and let's meet, let's chat. And I would share, what I was doing there. But I wasn't creating content and putting it out there, or didn't evolve my LinkedIn to like, hey, I'm this LinkedIn person. I was still a staffing person. But again, you'll have to just kind of test that out with, with what you're comfortable with. And if your boss
Yeah.
totally supports you, there's a lot of people, I want to say 90% of people have a side hustle on LinkedIn. Now that varies, right? That could be like, I have I'm a consultant for MLM and I barely do
Yeah.
anything with it, to like, I am leaving my job in 90 days because we've got this full-blown company in place. So the spectrum varies. But yeah, that's what I would say, Lisa, is just depends on like what you're comfortable with, if your boss knows, if they support you or if they don't. And if you want to keep your job while having your side hustle, like these are all things that you need to consider. There's a way to do it. There's a way to have both.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up this really important piece too of like, there is a reality that a lot of people have side hustles, and yet the organization that you work for may not be comfortable with that yet. And so that's where it's like a very contextual decision.
Yeah. And I will say, I have a personal story around this that I can share.
Yeah.
When I was on maternity leave my first time, and my whole LinkedIn boot camp was like popping off, and I hustled during my maternity leave. I was like, yes, let's go. I love this. I'm on maternity leave, so I get to focus all on my business. And I was very out loud on Instagram, very out loud on Instagram. I wasn't doing anything on LinkedIn yet. And my boss calls me while I was on maternity leave and said, hey, we're seeing this, which I was like, oh my gosh. I was, first of all, mortified because I didn't know they were on Instagram very much. And my husband's like, yeah, you're out there on the internet. Like people are going to find out, people are going to find out. And they called me out on it. And they're like, hey, we're cool with it. We just want to make sure like you're loyal to us when you come back. Right.
Yes.
And I was like, noted. Okay. So
Yeah.
just know, like, and they're very big company, traditional company. They are not one of those companies that's like, yeah, cool, we're cool, you doing whatever you want. Like, that's not them. And at the time I was like, I can't lose my job. So had to figure that out. But
Yeah. That's a real thing that everybody is, well, a high percentage of people are going to have to navigate. And there is this element of perception of loyalty when you're talking about other things. And that makes sense that everybody's navigating that.
Yeah.
I thought this was interesting. Somebody said, we actually have had such good luck with employee referrals that candidates who respond to our ads have been noticeably poorer fits. That's pretty across the board. That is very common. And that's why LinkedIn, I think, is so important. And I'm so glad you mentioned this, Bear, because it's true that when you know somebody, you automatically, some of it's unconscious too. It's human nature. You know if somebody's going to fit into your organization or not versus just a straight, flat, two-dimensional ad about your organization. So that's the other piece that's so great, isn't it, Lindsay? I've seen this happen on LinkedIn is like, hey, my company, I love it. We're hiring a graphic designer. If you know a graphic designer who loves dogs, because I work for Chewy.com, if you love dogs and you're a graphic designer, hit me up. And you'll get tons of referrals and opportunities. And a lot of organizations have picked up on this and they pay their employees to recruit for them on their LinkedIn page.
Yep.
Which is brilliant.
Yep. It's just another reason why not only do you want to have a LinkedIn presence as a company, but why you want your employees to be active on LinkedIn and building networks.
Yes.
Like if your concern is that people are going to poach your people, we have a bigger problem. We have a much bigger problem. It is not about your employees getting poached. There's a bigger problem at hand. That's all I'll say.
I love it. I'm smiling so big right now because we talk about this all the time. There's two things that are happening that Lindsay and I are bouncing between. One is the theory of the future of work. What will it look like and what's fair game and what's reasonable and what will humans want and what will humans be willing to do? There's the theory piece that her and I are talking about. And then there's the tactical skills on this specific network where I believe, I know you believe this, LinkedIn is highly strategic. It's a strategic place to be when you think about your career. When you think about how you're going to design your career, meet the right people to have on your life team, to have on your board of directors, get the right mentors, design a career path that makes sense, LinkedIn is the platform for that. And so we're talking about these two things, the theory behind the future of work and the tools and the skills it takes to do it on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And that these two, you might be stuck in one. You might be like, I understand the theory. I'm cool. The future of work, multi-jobs. I understand. But LinkedIn scares me. I get it. Now, Linz, you spent a lot of time. I mean, you really do both. You did both for me. You do both for a lot of people. But your sweet spot, like you were saying, is this idea of helping you get very strategic on LinkedIn and make the most of it. Yeah. So if people want to learn more from you about this, I think we have a link, right? Where people can get a free guide.
Yep.
For setting up their LinkedIn. What would you say? What is this resource called? Sam, will you post it for us?
It's actually the LinkedIn content playbook because I was finding that most people really struggle. Just how do I even post content on LinkedIn? Where do I start? What do I talk about? I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So that's what this resource is. I will say there are some really exciting digital products coming in the next 30 to 60 days from my end that just helps kickstart your profile. Get stuff like that. Think about content, even if you're not active on another platform, like how do we just start to create content for LinkedIn because you really do want to focus on this being the platform for the goals that you have. So there's a lot of that coming, but the LinkedIn content playbook is a great place to start, especially if you're active other places. How can you repurpose? The goal is not to make it more work for you. It's not. We know that LinkedIn is not your job.
Full time.
We just want to showcase the things that you do in your job to attract the right people into your community or into your business or into your company.
Brilliant. That's so helpful, Linz.
Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you. Yeah.
People are saying thank you for the resource too. That's great. I'll make sure to put it in the show notes too for the podcast so people can get to it later. Okay. Last question, Linz.
Yes.
If you had one message for leaders right now, when it comes to the theory of the future of work, that piece, what message would you share with leaders right now, maybe that you're seeing in real time or that you've learned over the years in your position? What would you share with them as they think about the next 12 to 18 months in their company?
Building your audience, having a personal presence is the most important thing that you can do, because people want to work for a person. They want to follow a person. They want to be led by a strong leader. And so when you show up like that on a platform, especially like LinkedIn, you cannot go wrong. It will be one of the most beneficial things that you can do for your personal career, to benefit your company, all of it. That's what I would say.
Brilliant. Brilliant. What a great thing to focus on.
Just figure out, like, how can we get over these internal little struggles that we have about showing up on social,
Yeah.
blow past those, and just start to show up, be consistent with that message, because it can only benefit you. It can only benefit you, only upside.
I love that. That is so good, Lindsay. Thank you for spending time with us today. I cannot wait. There was a lot of people that wanted to come but couldn't come onto the Zoom today. So I cannot wait to get this recording out, because so many people will benefit from hearing from you, both your perspective and some real tactics that we can take to get better on our LinkedIn and to be more influential and to know how to use it properly. I love that you bring that to the table, and we'll keep everybody who watches the porch, I'm going to keep them in mind as your new resources roll out so that they can continue to learn from you. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. We're really excited to be rolling out some things, especially, like I said, as we're moving into times of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Just some of the things, especially on LinkedIn, that you want to get in place, so you just have a little bit more confidence if you are laid off, or if you are looking at some different options for yourself. You've got all this stuff done on LinkedIn and you're good to go.
You're 10 steps ahead.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks for being here today. Thank you all for joining us on the porch. We love spending this time with you and learning from each other. You know where to find me if you need anything. And Sam has posted our links so you can connect with Lindsay. Ironically, you should probably go follow her on LinkedIn. Crazy idea. Crazy idea to stay connected that way. You can find her on LinkedIn. You can find both of us there. Thank you so much for your time. We will see you soon. Thanks for coming to the porch.